Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Fantasy 420, where today we're going to be returning to the hardwood and discussing some Week 24 priority waiver wire ads, aka the championship week. Hopefully, everybody watching this video is all in this championship week for most leagues, and we're all competing together, and we're all going to come away with the title. All these players, just like in my previous priority ad videos, are either 50% or less owned in most Yahoo leagues, and all players have 4 games next week. No teams have 5. So this is it. We need to just maximize our game totals for the week, and we're going to have to cut some really good players who've done really well for us, but it's all just about getting the most games possible. So with that being said, I have 5 names we're going to highlight. The first being Terrence Ross, who is 50% owned. He plays shooting guard, small forward for the Orlando Magic. Just wanted to highlight, he's had a really awesome season in points-based leagues so far. His pre-rank before the season was around 264th, and he's ranked around 92nd right now. So he's been a very useful player throughout a vast majority of the season. He's been averaging 25 minutes a game and over 25 fantasy points over his last 7 games. And he just had a 36-minute, 31.7 rebound, and 40.4 fantasy point game. Granted, it was in overtime, but those games do count too, and he might have some overtime games coming up this week. So it's also important to know Orlando is just 1 game out of the 8th seed for the playoffs, and as the season's coming to an end, they're going to be pushing all their players to the limit to try to get in. So I really like him going forward, and I also like his backcourt mate, DJ Augustine, who is 49% owned, and he's the point guard for Orlando. Terrence Ross is more of a bench player, but DJ Augustine is that starter role in the point guard for that team. He's really turned up his play over the last calendar month, and he's in the same vein as Ross, just playing about 25 minutes a game. He's scoring about 25 fantasy points per game, and he's even averaged around 35 fantasy points per game over the last 4. He also had 39 points against Memphis in that overtime game we just mentioned, where Ross went off. So he's just another huge piece for that playoff contender, and I just like both players a lot for this week. So add them and reap the benefits. The next name I'll be looking at is Thomas Bryant. He's 33% owned right now, a center for Washington. And in the last 2 games, he's had 35 and 36 minutes and 37 and 30 fantasy points. But even more importantly than that, Coach Scott Brooks has kind of waved the white flag and is looking towards their young players and how they're going to gel towards their next season. And he said, quote, he really wants to get a look at Portis and Bryant starting going forward. So those guys are going to be getting a lot of minutes, scoring a lot of points, and I really like him in the next 4 games for this week. The next guy I'm going to mention is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He is 50% owned and a point guard shooting guard for the Los Angeles Clippers. He is at 29 plus minutes and fantasy points in his last 5 games. It's also important to mention that the Clippers are jockeying for playoff position in the West. They've secured a spot, but they can land anywhere from 3rd to 8th position. They obviously want to dodge the Warriors and Nuggets and get as far up as possible and face a worse team. So they're going to play all their players just as much going out like Orlando is. And he's been playing a lot in huge games. So I just really like him moving forward for this next week. Another young guy who they're going to get a lot of minutes. And his low shooting percentages, especially as a guard, don't really hurt you as much in points-based leagues. So those top 4 guys I would really add before anyone else. And then the last name I'll mention, who's a little bit lower in tier, is Delon Wright. He's around 24% owned, point guard, shooting guard on the Memphis Grizzlies. I've mentioned him before. He is at 25 plus fantasy points per game. Since March began, he's had a couple 40-point games mixed in there. He's around 30 fantasy points per game since then. They might be resting Mike Conley. I just really like him going forward, and he usually gives you a steal, maybe even more. He can provide you defensive stats, which are always valuable in points-based leagues for basketball. So those are 5 names I would look to add going forward. Like I said, don't be hesitant to drop somebody, especially on the Knicks, who only have 2 games this week. But hopefully we all win some championships. Thank you all for watching the video. Hopefully you can give me a subscribe or a like. I'll leave a link at the end, and talk to you guys tomorrow with another video. Hopefully you all have a great day, and peace.